I never thought I'd be burying my son at 5 years old. No parent does. Yet, there I stood, in front of a small white casket, the weight of grief pressing down on my chest like an iron hand. Noah's favorite blue blanket was tucked inside with him. I made sure of that. He always said it made him feel safe. Safe. The one thing I failed to give him when it mattered most. The church was silent except for the hushed whispers behind me. They weren't just mourning Noah. They were dissecting my life with their sharp tongues and sharper eyes. Dash, where's his wife? Dash, how could she not be here? A small town thrives on gossip, and today they had something new to feast on. Claire's absence was as loud as a gunshot in a quiet room. They didn't know what I knew. Minutes before I stepped into the church, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I glanced at it, expecting condolences or some last-minute detail about the service. But what I saw made my blood run cold. A picture clear as day. Claire lounging by a pool, her skin glowing under the Hawaiian sun. A man, younger, tanned, and smug, had his arm draped around her shoulders. A cocktail sat in her manicured hand. Below the photo, a message. Thought you should see what your wife is really doing today. A concerned friend. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Claire wasn't on a business trip like she had told me. She wasn't sitting in the front row of the church, holding my hand. She was sipping margaritas in paradise with a stranger while I was about to lower our son into the ground. The weight of betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. But there was no time to react. A hand gripped my arm, my mother's. Jacob, you're shaking. I shoved the phone into my pocket, as if burying it could make it disappear. It didn't. That image was seared into my mind. But I couldn't break down. Not now. I swallowed the rage clawing its way up my throat, nodded at the funeral director, and forced my feet to move. I sat in the front pew, in the spot where Claire should have been, and lifted my chin. I wouldn't give this town the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Not yet. The service started, but I barely heard the pastor's words. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. He spoke about Noah's boundless energy, his love for life, even in the hardest days of his illness. Then he mentioned my son's favorite pastime, coloring white roses with food dye. My chest tightened. I could almost see him again, his little hands stained blue and purple, his giggles echoing through the hospital room. My eyes flicked to the bouquet on his casket. White roses. As far as the eye could see. Claire hated white roses. Called them boring. But I insisted. These weren't for her. They were for Noah. And she didn't deserve to be here anyway. Then my phone buzzed again. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But something inside me, something raw and burning, made me pull it from my pocket. A text. From Claire. Dash, sorry I couldn't make it. Important business meeting. I'll make it up to you. Make it up to me? Make up for skipping her own son's funeral? Make up for sipping cocktails while I lowered him into the ground? The rage came fast and hot, scorching away the grief, if only for a moment. She had no idea what was coming. I wouldn't crumble like she expected. I wouldn't be the grieving widower she could manipulate. Claire abandoned us when no one needed her most. And I would make sure she didn't walk away unscathed. That promise solidified in my chest as I stood to deliver the eulogy. I looked out at the crowd, neighbors, co-workers, family, friends. Their pitying eyes burned into me, but I didn't let my voice waver. Every word was for Noah. Every story about his joy, his strength, his love for life, it was all a vow. A vow to protect his memory. A vow to ensure Claire's betrayal wouldn't taint his legacy. I didn't shed a tear. I saved those for later, when I was alone. Because today wasn't about my pain. It was about Noah. But deep down, I knew one thing for certain. Claire thought she could betray me and walk away without consequences. She was wrong. So very, very wrong. The funeral reception was a blur. People came and went, offering condolences in hushed tones, their eyes filled with rehearsed sympathy. Plates of untouched casseroles and cookies covered every surface, as if food could patch the hole in my chest. But the whispers were louder than anything else. Dash, she didn't even show up. Dash in Hawaii, with another man. They thought I didn't hear them. They were wrong. I moved through my parents' house like a ghost, nodding absently at distant relatives, shaking hands with people who barely knew Noah. The sympathy felt like an insult, not because it wasn't deserved, but because it wasn't honest. I didn't need their pity. I needed the truth. Across the room, Claire's parents, Diana and Howard, stood near the kitchen, their faces unreadable. They hadn't spoken to me all day. Maybe they thought if they stayed quiet, I wouldn't confront them. They were wrong about that, too. Diana approached first. Her voice was too soft, too sweet, like venom wrapped in silk. Jacob, you've been so strong today. It's a shame Claire couldn't be here, but she's grieving in her own way. You know how difficult this has been for her. Difficult? For her? My grip on the photo frame in my hand tightened until my knuckles turned white. It was a picture of Noah, his gap-toothed grin beaming as he held up one of his little science experiments, a white rose, dyed bright blue with food coloring. He'd been so proud that day. I turned to Diana, my voice colder than I intended. I imagine Hawaii is a nice distraction from all that difficulty. For the first time, Diana's carefully practiced expression cracked. Just for a second. She recovered quickly, lips pressing into a thin line. Grief makes people act out of character, Jacob. Claire needed space to process everything. You should try to be more understanding. Understanding? My jaw clenched so tight it ached. She didn't know, did she? Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. I wanted to pull out my phone, shove that picture in her face, make her look at the truth she was so desperate to ignore. But I didn't. Instead, I set Noah's picture back on the mantel with trembling hands. Then my mother appeared at my side, her presence grounding me in a way nothing else could. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. Diana, I think you've said enough. Diana bristled, but she didn't argue. She simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the kitchen. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. My mother's hand rested on my arm. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Don't let her get to you. She knows, doesn't she? I asked, my voice barely above a breath. My mother nodded. She's her mother, Jacob. Of course she knows. The confirmation hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just Claire's betrayal. It was a family affair. Diana and Howard had known all along, and they had chosen to protect Claire instead of holding her accountable. The realization burned through me. I clenched my fists. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let Claire walk away, and I sure as hell wouldn't let her family cover for her. This wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about justice. For Noah. For me. For everything she had stolen. And I was just getting started. I needed air. The house was suffocating. Too many voices, too many eyes watching me, waiting for me to crack. I slipped away, heading upstairs to Noah's room. The second I stepped inside, the scent of his strawberry shampoo hit me like a punch to the ribs. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. His stuffed penguin sat on his pillow, slightly lopsided from years of being dragged around. His little sneakers were still by the door, as if he'd come running back at any moment. I swallowed hard and ran a hand over my face. Then something caught my eye. Claire's desk. Neat, precise, color-coded. Claire had always been obsessive about organization. And yet, today, something was out of place. A stack of papers, haphazardly thrown onto the surface, as if she'd been in a rush. That wasn't like her. I stepped closer, my pulse picking up as I sifted through the documents. Bills, receipts, normal stuff. But then, at the bottom of the pile, I found something that stopped me cold. A life insurance policy. Noah's name was printed at the top in bold letters. Claire's was listed as the sole beneficiary. My stomach twisted. I kept flipping through the pages, my hands shaking as I read the fine print. The policy had been taken out 6 months after Noah's diagnosis. And worse, there was an amendment. Claire had removed me as a beneficiary just weeks before Noah died. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady myself. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just running off to Hawaii with some guy. Claire had planned this. She had been securing her future, long before Noah was even gone. A rush of nausea hit me as I found bank statements. Underneath the policy, withdrawals, transfers. Loans taken out against the policy before Noah had even passed. She'd already been spending the money. On what? On plane tickets? Cocktails by the pool. I sank into the chair, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Noah was still fighting for his life, and she had already cashed him in. I stared at the papers, my vision blurring at the edges. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. A woman's voice. Low. Hesitant. Urgent. Jacob, you don't know me, but I need to talk to you. I frowned. Who is this? My name's Mia. I know about Claire. I know about Hawaii. And I know you're not going to like what I have to tell you. My fingers tightened around the phone. Why should I trust you? She exhaled. You shouldn't. But you should hear me out. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main. Tonight. The call disconnected. I sat there, gripping the phone, staring at the life insurance papers spread out in front of me. I didn't know who this Mia was, but something told me. She had the missing piece. And I was ready for it. Or at least, I thought I was. The coffee shop on Main was the kind of place Claire would have hated. Plain, unremarkable, nothing Instagram-worthy about it. I pushed through the door, the scent of burnt coffee and cheap pastries hitting me immediately. The place was mostly empty, save for a few tired-looking patrons hunched over their drinks. And then I saw her. A woman sat in the corner by the window, her posture stiff, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her steady. She had dark auburn hair pulled into a neat ponytail, sharp green eyes that flicked to me the moment I walked in. Mia. I made my way over and slid into the seat across from her. I dropped the folder of documents onto the table with a dull thud. Dash, you have 5 minutes, I said flatly. She studied me, then let out a small, humorless laugh. Dash, straight to business. I respect that. I didn't reply. She sighed, glancing down at her cup before speaking. Dash, your wife Claire has been seeing my ex-boyfriend for over a year. The words should have hit harder, but I already knew. I just nodded. Dash, oh, you knew, she said, tilting her head slightly. Dash, then do you know about the money? About how they've been planning to use it to start their little dream life together in Maui. My spine straightened. What money? Mia leaned forward, lowering her voice. Dash, the life insurance payout. The $1 million policy Claire took out on your son. She promised half of it to Brandon, my ex, so they could buy a beachfront property together. The world around me blurred for a second. I wanted to accuse her of lying, wanted to shove my chair back and walk out. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, gripping the edge of the table so tight my fingers ached. And how exactly do you know this? She smirked, but there was no humor in it. Dash, Brandon isn't exactly discreet. He's been bragging about it for weeks. At first, I thought he was exaggerating, but then he started showing me proof. She pulled out her phone, scrolled quickly, then slid it across the table. I stared at the screen. Text messages. From Claire. Claire, the payout came through. It's more than enough. We'll be out of here by the end of the month. Brandon, Maui's waiting, babe. Just don't let him suspect anything. Claire, he's too broken to see straight. It's already done. My breath turned shallow. The Claire in those messages wasn't the woman I had married. She was cold, calculating, unrecognizable. Mia kept talking. Dash, Brandon showed me more, bank transfers, flight itineraries, even a picture of the house they were planning to buy. Claire's been funneling the money into an account with both their names on it. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to look back up at her. Why are you telling me this? Mia leaned back, crossing her arms. Dash, because she's playing both of us. Dash, she promised Brandon a fresh start, but I've seen the way she operates. The moment she doesn't need him anymore, she'll drop him, just like she's dropping you. And me? I'm already collateral damage. I've got nothing left to lose. Her words hung between us, sharp and bitter. I didn't trust her. Not completely. But I couldn't ignore the proof she had just handed me. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice low. Mia's eyes darkened. Dash, revenge. Justice. Call it whatever you want. Dash, Brandon doesn't get to walk away scot-free. And Claire? She sure as hell doesn't either. I studied her, searching for any sign of deception. She met my gaze head-on, unflinching. I didn't trust her motives. But I knew one thing for certain. Claire had stolen from me, lied to me, betrayed me in ways I hadn't even begun to comprehend. I exhaled slowly. I'm in. Mia nodded, her expression softening slightly. Dash, good. Because this. She slid a thick envelope across the table. Dash, this is just the beginning. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it, the weight of everything that had been taken from me. As I stood to leave, Mia called after me. Dash, Jacob, she said, her voice quieter now. I turned back. Dash, I'm sorry about your son. For what it's worth, I think Claire's the one who's broken, not you. Her words lingered in my head as I stepped into the cold night air. My mind raced with possibilities, with next steps, with all the ways I could make Claire pay for what she had done. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about taking everything back. And they had no idea who they were up against. I spent the night tearing through the envelope Mia had given me. It was a roadmap of Claire's betrayal, bank statements, emails, hidden accounts. Every lie, every dollar stolen, laid out in black and white. But one thing stood out above everything else. Claire hadn't just been funneling money into an account with Brandon. She had also forged my signature on documents related to our house. I flipped through the papers, my pulse hammering. She was selling our home. The house where Noah took his first steps, where I read to him every night before bed. Claire had already listed it. And if I didn't act fast, she'd finalize the sale within days. A slow, cold anger settled into my bones. She wanted to take everything from me. She thought I'd be too broken to stop her. She was wrong. I reached for my phone and called the only person who could help me now. Marcus Caldwell had been my best friend since high school. Now, he was a lawyer, the kind that made people very uncomfortable when he walked into a room. He picked up on the first ring. Jacob. His voice was sharp, alert. You okay? I need your help, I said. Claire forged my signature. She's trying to sell the house. Silence. Then, a low curse. Send me everything. Now. I scanned the documents, sending them over one by one. Marcus barely took a minute to reply. This is bad. But not for you, for her. What do we do? First, we stop the sale. I'll file an injunction first thing in the morning. But Jacob, this goes deeper than real estate fraud. She's siphoning money, moving assets. If we dig a little deeper, we might have enough to bring serious charges against her. I exhaled slowly. Then let's dig. By the time the sun rose, Marcus had already put the legal gears in motion. The sale of the house was frozen. Claire couldn't touch it, not without answering to a judge. But that wasn't enough. I needed more. That morning, I went to the one person who had been quietly keeping tabs on Claire all along. My mother. I found her in the kitchen, stirring a cup of tea. She didn't look surprised to see the fire in my eyes. You found something, didn't you? She asked, setting her cup down. I nodded. They were trying to sell the house, Mom. Claire and her parents. They forged my signature. Her expression darkened. I knew Diana was up to something, she muttered. She's been sniffing around for months, asking questions about the property. She even tried to get your father to sign something when he was confused. But I intercepted it. My blood ran cold. She tried to trick Dad? My father's memory had been slipping for years. Some days, he was sharp as ever. Others, he forgot what day it was. Claire and her family had tried to exploit that. A fresh wave of rage burned through me. Mom, do you still have those papers? She nodded and disappeared into my father's study. Moments later, she returned with a stack of documents. I flipped through them, my hands shaking. There it was. A legal form authorizing the sale of the house. And at the bottom, my father's signature. Except, it wasn't his. It was a forgery. They had tried to trick an old man with dementia into signing away his family's home. I gritted my teeth, barely keeping my fury in check. They think they can get away with this, I said, my voice low. They think I'll just roll over and take it. My mother rested a hand on my arm. Then don't. The next morning, I dressed like a man going to war. Suit pressed, tie knotted, folder in hand. Marcus had already filed the legal paperwork, but I wanted to deliver the message myself. Claire and her mother had a meeting scheduled with the realtor that afternoon. They thought they were walking in to finalize the sale. Instead, they were walking into an ambush. When I arrived at the real estate office, Claire and Diana were already there, sipping coffee and making polite conversation. Their smiles faded instantly when they saw me. Jacob. Claire blinked, feigning surprise. What are you doing here? I didn't reply. I just walked to the table, set down my folder, and flipped it open. Bank records, emails, forged documents. Their entire scheme laid bare. Diana's face paled. Claire's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. This is a joke, she said, forcing a laugh. Jacob, I know you're upset, but… Cut the act, I snapped. You lied to me. You stole from me. And now, you're trying to sell our house out from under me. Claire swallowed. Oh, and by the way, I slid a recording device onto the table. I have proof of your little vacation plans with Brandon. The bank transfers. The emails. The life insurance fraud. Everything. She went still. Diana recovered faster. Dash, you don't have a case, Jacob. You're just grasping at straws. I smirked. Dash, that's funny. Because Marcus, my lawyer, is already filing fraud charges against you both. So, if you really want to test whether I have a case, be my guest. But I think the court will be very interested in this forged signature. I tapped the document. Claire finally broke. Dash, Jacob, please. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I was just. Dash, save it. She opened her mouth again, but I didn't hear her. Because at that moment, Marcus walked in, a court order in hand. Dash, sorry I'm late, he said, flashing a tight smile. Dash, I was just at the courthouse filing an injunction. The house isn't going anywhere. But Claire? Diana? You might be. The realtor, who had been silent the entire time, cleared his throat. Dash, I think that's my cue to leave. He grabbed his briefcase and practically ran out the door. I turned back to Claire and Diana. Dash, you have two choices, I said, my voice calm. Dash, walk away now or fight me in court. And trust me, you will lose. Diana opened her mouth, but Claire grabbed her arm. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Dash, Mom. Stop. She whispered. Dash, he's not bluffing. Diana hesitated. Then, without another word, they stood and walked out. Their once confident strides now shaky and uncertain. As the door closed behind them, I let out a slow breath. Marcus clapped me on the back. Dash, you did good, Jacob. I wasn't celebrating yet. Because this was just one battle. The war wasn't over. Not yet. The moment Claire and Diana walked out of that office, I knew one thing. This wasn't over. They weren't the kind of people to take their losses quietly. They would regroup, spin a new lie, try to twist the story in their favor. I wasn't going to let that happen. So while Claire and her mother were scrambling to find their next move, I was already 10 steps ahead. Marcus wasted no time. That afternoon, he filed a civil suit against Claire and her parents. Fraud, property theft, and conspiracy. But the real hit came when he uncovered something even worse. Claire and Diana hadn't just tried to forge my father's signature. They had been systematically draining his accounts for months. Dash, this isn't just fraud, Jacob. Marcus told me over the phone. Dash, this is elder abuse. And the courts won't take it lightly. I stared at the floor, gripping my phone. Dash, how bad is it? Dash, bad for them. Diana and Howard used your father's declining memory to gain access to his finances. Claire funneled some of that money into her secret account. We have a paper trail, and once we present this to a judge, it's over for them. I exhaled, my anger simmering beneath the surface. They thought they could manipulate me, use my grief to blind me. They thought I was weak. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. The first domino to fall was Brandon. Faced with the possibility of being dragged into a full-blown fraud investigation, Claire's lover did exactly what I expected. He flipped. Marcus got a call from his lawyer. Brandon was willing to testify in exchange for immunity. And what he had to say? It was damning. Claire had promised him half of the insurance payout. She had planned their escape down to the last detail, right up until the moment I found out. The money, the fake expenses, the emails where she called me, too broken to see straight. It was all there. And now, it was evidence. Small towns love a scandal. And this was bigger than anything they had ever seen. The news spread like wildfire. The whispers at the funeral had turned into headlines. Dash, local woman accused of insurance fraud after son's death. Dash, family caught in elder abuse investigation. Claire, Diana, and Howard, once the town's golden family, were pariahs overnight. And the best part? I didn't have to say a word. The truth spoke for itself. By the time we reached the courtroom, Claire looked nothing like the woman in that Hawaii photo. Gone was the perfectly curated image. She was pale, exhausted, a woman desperately trying to hold on to a life that was slipping through her fingers. Diana sat beside her, lips pressed into a thin line. Howard wouldn't even meet my eyes. And when the judge laid out the charges, fraud, financial misconduct, elder abuse, they all knew it was over. Claire tried one last time. She turned to me, her voice trembling. Dash, Jacob, please. I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't even blink. You meant every word you wrote. Her lips parted, but she saw the look in my eyes. And she knew. There was no coming back from this. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. The house was officially mine again. Claire was cut off from the life insurance payout. And her family? Destroyed. Diana and Howard lost everything. Their reputation. Their influence. Their standing in the town. Claire? She walked away with nothing. Brandon left her. The money was gone. She had sacrificed her marriage, her son's memory. For what? A dream that died the second I found that picture. And me? I did the only thing I could. I took what was left of that insurance money, the same money she had tried to steal, and put it somewhere it actually mattered. I started the Noah Thompson Foundation. Every penny went toward pediatric cancer research. Every dime went to families like ours. Families fighting the same battle Noah had fought. Claire's betrayal had taken so much from me. But in the end, she didn't win. The house was quiet now. For months, it had been filled with lawyers, documents, and the weight of betrayal. But now it was still. I walked into Noah's room and sat on his bed. His stuffed penguin was still there, right where he left it. For the first time in a long time, I let myself remember his laughter, his silly jokes, the way he hugged me so tight, like he never wanted to let go. I picked up the penguin, running my fingers over the worn fabric. Dash, I fixed it, buddy, I whispered. Dash, I made it right. The foundation was already helping families. Noah's name, his memory, was living on. And me? For the first time, I wasn't filled with anger. Not with Claire. Not with her family. Not even with the universe for taking my son too soon. Because revenge wasn't the answer. It never was. As I sat there, the sun streamed through the window, warming the room. A butterfly landed on the windowsill, delicate, weightless, free. And for the first time in months, I finally understood. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about justice. It was about letting go. I stood, grabbed my keys, and headed downstairs. My father was waiting by the door, his eyes clear for the first time in a while. Dash, pancakes? I asked, smiling slightly. His face lit up. Dash, Noah always loved pancakes. Yeah, I said, my heart lighter than it had been in a long time. He did. As we walked out, I glanced back one last time. The stuffed penguin sat on the bed. A quiet guardian. A reminder of everything we had fought for. And as I stepped into the warm morning air, I knew. I would never forget Noah. But it was time to start living again.